Netflix? Yeah, so Netflix started off as a DVD by mail company, and they still do that, but many of us know them as an online streaming service, right? You can go there to find movies and TV shows with a very wide selection. But one of the things that's interesting about them is that in order to have a system that can recommend for you the next show that you might want to watch, they have a crazy detailed category system of categories that if you know how to work it, you can use to find these really carefully selected pieces. So if you want to know if you're looking for a movie based on a children's book that set in the Middle East with a 13-year-old anti-hero protagonist who's also a magician, there's a category for that. They go crazy detailed, and if you know how to work it, then you can find these shows. And so I was thinking about us, I'm thinking about Netflix, probably because I was watching it this week, but thinking about their categories, and the fact that we come here every single week to try to find more and to learn more about this guy that we are betting our lives on. This guy, Jesus of Nazareth, where we want to find out about his biography. Well, we want to find out who he is. We want to find out what he has to say to us here 2,000 years later. And it got me to wondering, where would Netflix put Jesus' story? What would be the category for it? Is it an indie zombie movie? Or a romantic comedy? Oh, that would be weird, right? Is it a supernatural superhero story? What category? And it matters how we understand and approach Jesus' story, because we know that's going to help shape what we are hearing from it, but then also how we understand who this is we're following and what it means to follow him. Now this year, we are focused on the Gospel of Mark. And Mark gives us this great hint, because the Gospel starts by telling us what kind of story it is. The first lines say, the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ. The beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ. It puts us on notice. This is going to be an announcement, a proclamation, something to inspire hope, but also it is about Jesus Christ. And man, from the very beginning, it is spot on, and it is paced so fast. First thing that happens, Jesus comes out and gets baptized, and the special effects department comes in, right? You've got the dove falling down. You've got the voiceover coming from the heavens, and then immediately, Jesus, who is chased out into the desert. Out there in the desert, face to face with the king of evil, the king of demons, Satan, in this showdown out in the desert for 6 weeks. But Jesus, he's got the angels on this side, and he's got the wild animals on this side. For 6 weeks they are in conversation, until finally, after 6 weeks, Jesus comes walking back into town with the dust still on his cloak. And if we only had a tumbleweed, and we had some jingling spurs, we know this is one of those supernatural westerns, battle of good and evil movies. But then there's a change. And we wind up in a new category, because all of a sudden, Jesus comes into town. He goes down to the beach, and he's standing there in the sand with the water sloshing in his feet, sort of sinking down, and it only takes 2 words that I hear in a sort of gritty kind of voice, "Follow me." That's all it takes. And people will drop everything for this man. Family and work and nets and fish and boats, they will drop everything. And now we've got Jesus, the superhero. Because right away the battle is joined. First thing, there's a demon in the synagogue. Out you go. And then there's somebody who's sick. Makes her well. And then just so we get the sort of macho tender side of our hero here, we have him go straight to Simon's house where his dear mother-in-law is sick, and Jesus, breaking barriers, going in, reaches out very tenderly, lifts her right up out of her fever. We got Jesus, who is the success story. Jesus who, and just we get that sort of plucky underdog note that we tend to like in our movies and in our stories. We got Jesus who will break the barriers that stand in the way of setting people free. It's a Sabbath, but she's sick. She's healed. There's a demon, but it's Sabbath. Get him out of there. This is Jesus so wildly successful that the crowds are too big to fit into town. Jesus can't even go into the town villages anymore. Crowds gathered, people healed. This is Jesus, the well-armed hero who's going to set us free and keep us safe. We know this story, don't we? We like this story, don't we? This is Jesus that we think we can count on. He'll be there. He's going to put swords in every hand and kick those bum Romans out. He's going to keep us safe and set us free. Jesus, the underdog success story. Then about chapter 8, things change. Now, it may be because his cousin John has just been killed. But it happens, it seems like, in a town called Bethsaida. And there in Bethsaida, as Jesus is coming into town and the word has spread and the crowds are gathered, there's a blind man there. He's not a beggar because he's got friends. He's got people who will care for him. And they bring him, they lead him to Jesus. Says that Jesus takes him by the elbow and brings him outside of town. And Jesus takes his own spit. He smears it on the man's eyes. He places his hands on him and he prays over him. And he says, "What do you see?" And this blind man sort of squints. And he says, "Well, I see people, but they look like trees, and they're walking all around." And Jesus says, "Well, that's not good." Puts his hands on his eyes again and prays a second time and says, "How about now?" And the man looks and he says, "I see you. I see you." And it's a strange story, right? It's a strange miracle story that it takes Jesus 2 tries. That Jesus has to do it twice. But it's also true of us, isn't it? We don't always get it right the first time. We don't always see at first. And sometimes we need Jesus to keep working on us, right? Take Peter. Today's story, right? Immediately after Bethsaida, as they're on their way, Jesus has started turning his feet toward Jerusalem, the capital city, where the authorities are waiting for him. And on the way, Jesus, really kind of for the first time in the gospel, says, "What's the word? What are people saying?" And so they give him the answer. Some say you're a superhero. Some say you're one of those really gritty indie heroes, anti-heroes. Some say you're Elijah. Some say you're John the Baptist. Some say you're a prophet. And Jesus nods. And what about you? Who do you say that I am? Now think about what's echoing in Peter's head. Think about what he has just seen. Jesus face to face with the demons, out of there. Jesus healing. Jesus teaching. Crowds gathered desperate for what he offers. Think about the success story that Peter has been living, following behind this man that he has cast his life upon. Follow me, and Peter has followed him into this wonderful story. But think what else, how that echoes in Peter's head. Because Peter has also inherited 1,000 years worth of hope of a Messiah who will be king, military leader. He'll be the tough guy to kick out the Romans who are occupying them, those brutal Romans who love to use crosses. He will come with a sword and a mighty outstretched arm and set his people free and establish David's throne forever. Think of all those echoes that Peter has inherited. So of course, Peter says, you are the Messiah. And he means all of that. The righteous one who will keep us safe, who will make us secure, who will establish David's throne forever. And Jesus doesn't say no. Jesus doesn't say no. What Jesus does say, he says, it's going to look like this. Suffering, betrayal, torture, a false, trumped-up trial for charges that can't possibly be true. A very public execution, humiliation, death, and then rise again. That's not the storyline we thought we were in, Jesus. That's not the category this story is supposed to be. Surely, Peter says, God doesn't work that way, Jesus. I got 1,000 years of hope that tell me how this is supposed to be. I know this world, Jesus, and I know how things are in this world. Surely, God doesn't do that. And God will not allow that to happen to you. You didn't say no, Jesus. You are the Messiah, and surely that's not how God works. But they're on their way to Jerusalem. They're on their way to the capital where the authorities are waiting. Jesus, who will come face to face with power and tell the truth about it. But power, people who have power, use that power to keep their power. And they will do their best to crush him. And the cross that's waiting on the other side of Jerusalem, other side of the city for Jesus there, was Rome's way of wiping off the map anyone who challenged them, who told a different truth than the one that they wanted everybody to know and to follow. It was that public spectacle that humiliated anyone who dared to speak against the way they wanted the world to be. It was the crowds that gathered to jeer children on shoulders so that they could see this spectacle. It was the most painful and public way to get rid of those Rome needed out of the way. And that's where Jesus is heading as he says to us, follow me. Follow me to face down authority. Follow me to face down all who want power over. follow me into the jaws of power so that together we can proclaim the deeper truth that God is in this world and is in charge, that this is God's kingdom. Jesus says, follow me and pick up that cross. Because that is where we see him. That's where we see God, where we see Jesus, where we see Messiah, where we see love, God's love loose in the world, mercy on that cross. Jesus says, follow me.